Daf Yomi, Tractate Zevachim, page 104a, top of the page with the word Dumai Achar Hefshet. Kodem Sheniv Lehefshet, Achar Sheniv Lehefshet. And what does it mean by the phrase after filleting? It means before the moment the offerings became fit for filleting, and after the moment they became fit for filleting. In other words, before and after the sprinkling of the blood. My Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon Detanya Rabbi Omer Adam meratze ara'o b'fnei atzmo Ket ucheshivu im habasar noilad bo pasul ben kodim zrika uben ha'achar zrika harehu ki yotze bo. The Gemara clarifies, what is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi? And what is the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon? Their opinions are, as it is taught in Braita. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says, the blood affects acceptance of the hide by itself after it has been flayed, even if the flesh is disqualified. And if, when the hide is still with the flesh, a disqualification appears on the flesh, whether before the sprinkling of the blood or after the sprinkling of the blood, then the halacha with regard to the hide is parallel to the halacha with regard to the flesh. Both are burned. Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon Omer Ein Adam meratze ara'o mipnei atzmo וכשהוא עם הבשר נולד בו פסול קודם זריקה, הרי הוא כיוצא בו אחר זריקה. הוא הוצא פסל בשעה אחת, יפשיטנו ואוכל הכהנים. Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, says the blood does not affect acceptance of the hide by itself, and if, when the hide is still with the flesh, a disqualification appears on the flesh before the sprinkling of the blood, then the halacha with regard to the hide is parallel to the halacha with regard to the flesh. Both are burned. If a disqualification develops on the flesh after the sprinkling of the blood, the flesh was already accepted for a time. Therefore, even though the flesh is disqualified, the priest may flay the animal before it is burned, and its hide goes to the priests. Lema b'di Rabbi Eliezer v'Rabbi Yehoshua k'meflegi v'asis oil secha basar le'adam. Rabbi Yehoshua Amer im ein dam ein basar, im ein basar ein dam. The Gemara suggests, shall we say, that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi and Rabbi Elazar disagree about the same principle as do Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua. As it is taught in Braita, the verse states, and you shall offer your burnt offerings, the flesh and the blood, upon the altar of the Lord your God, Deuteronomy 12:27. Rabbi Yehoshua, which was the date, December 27th of this daf. Interesting. Rabbi Yehoshua says that the verse teaches that if there is no blood sprinkled on the altar, no flesh may be burned on the altar, and if there is no flesh to be burned on the altar, no blood may be sprinkled on the altar. Rabbi Eliezer Amer Dam אף על פי שאין בשר שנאמר ודם זבחיך ישפך אם כן מה תלמד לא יאמר ועשיתו לבשרך בשר ודם לא מלחמה ודם בזריקה בשר בזריקה לעומת זה שרווח יש בין כבש למזבח. Rabbi Eliezer says the blood must be sprinkled even if there is no flesh, and as it says, is stated in the continuation of the verse, and the blood of your sacrifices shall be poured out against the altar of the the Lord your God, and you shall eat the flesh. If so, what is taught when the verse states, and you shall offer your burnt offerings, the flesh and the blood? It is stated to tell you, just as blood is placed on the altar by sprinkling, so too the flesh is placed on the altar by tossing. Consequently, you learn that there is a space between the ramp and the altar such that the priest must toss the flesh from the edge of the ramp. Okay? Wow, this is a big daf. Whoa. Started, gotta finish it. I think I'll do the amid. Where were we? Consequently, you learn. Okay, Rabbi Eliezer says the blood must be sprinkled, even if there's no flesh. As it is stated in the continuation of the verse, and the blood of your sacrifice shall be poured against the altar of the Lord your God, you shall eat the flesh. If so, what is taught when the verse states, and you shall offer your burnt offerings, the flesh and the blood? It is stated to tell you, just as blood is placed on the altar by sprinkling, so too the flesh is placed on the altar by tossing. Consequently, you learn that there is a space between the ramp and the altar, such that the priest must toss the flesh from the edge of the ramp. The Lord explains, shall we say that the one who says that the hide is accepted independent of the flesh holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, that the blood is sprinkled independent of the flesh, and the one who says that the hide is not accepted independent of the flesh holds in according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehoshua, that if there is no flesh, then the blood is not sprinkled. Aliba de Rabbi Eliezer kuli alma la pligi, ki pligi aliba de Rabbi Yehoshua. Okay, the Gemara rejects this according to the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, who holds that the blood may be sprinkled even if the flesh is disqualified. Everyone agrees that this sprinkling affects acceptance of the hide. When they disagree, is according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehoshua. Man damar lahurtza ka Yehoshua. Man damar lahurtza amalach. Ad kan lo kam Rabbi Yehoshua hasam el abasar de lekab sedek lakohanim. Aval o di ikab sedek kohanim afilu Rabbi Yehoshua moed. The one who says that the hide is not accepted independently, in other words, is Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon, who holds in accordance with the straightforward meaning of the statement of Rabbi Yehoshua. Once the flesh is disqualified, the blood cannot be sprinkled and does not affect acceptance of the hide. The one who says that the hide is accepted, meaning Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, could say to you, Rabbi Yehoshua says only there that the blood may not be sprinkled in a case where nothing but the flesh was at stake, where there is no loss for the priests who never receive meat from burnt offerings, but in cases where the hide would go to waste, where there is a loss for the priests. Perhaps even Rabbi Yehoshua concedes that the blood affects acceptance. Mididavi idava ditnan nid mabasno nifsalo shiyatsa chutz laklaim. Rabbi Eliezer omer yizro Rabbi Yehoshua omer lo yizro umod Rabbi Yehoshua shimzra chutza. This latter interpretation of Yeshua's opinion with regard to the hides is just as it is with regard to disqualified flesh after the fact. As we learned in a Braita, if the flesh contracted ritual impurity or was disqualified or if it emerged beyond the curtains delineating its designated area. Rabbi Eliezer says the priest must nevertheless sprinkle the blood on the altar. Rabbi Yehoshua says the priest may not sprinkle the blood on the altar. And Rabbi Yehoshua concedes that if the priest nevertheless sprinkled the blood, the offering is accepted after the fact. Apparently, the sprinkling is sufficiently valid to effect acceptance of the hide. Amar Rabbi Chanina, Sgan HaKohanim, Velo, Hare, Parim, Hanisrafim, Usi'irim, Hanisrafim. The Mishnah teaches, Rabbi Chanina, the deputy high priest, said, in all my days, I never saw a hide going out to the place of burning. The Gemara challenges, and is that so? Did he really not see? Aren't there bulls that are burned and goats that are burned together with their hides as a matter of course? Zevachim no kamrinan. The Gemara answers, we are not saying that Rabbi Chanina never saw hides go out to be burned in accordance with their mitzvah. He certainly did. Rather, he never saw hides being burned because the offering was disqualified. That makes sense. Okay. Hare kodem hefshet v'kodem zrika chalutz kamrinan. The Gemara challenges, but isn't there a case where an offering is disqualified before filleting, before the sprinkling of the blood, in which case all agree that the animal is burned with its hide? The Gemara answers, we are saying that Rabbi Chanina never saw a hide go out stripped from its flesh. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon. The Gemara challenges, but isn't there a case where an offering is disqualified after the flaying of the hide and before the sprinkling of the blood, in which case the hide is burned according to the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, the son of Rabbi Shimon, who says the blood does not affect acceptance of the hide by itself? Rabbi Chanina, Karevi Sirle, Afilu Tzokma, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi She'ein Efshet Kodem Zika. The Gemara answers, Rabbi Chanina holds, in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, that the blood does affect acceptance of the hide in such a case, so it would not be burned. And if you wish, say instead that you can even interpret the opinion of Rabbi Chanina in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi concedes that the flaying is not done before the sprinkling, and so in practice, Rabbi Chanina never saw. Second here, pause it and get some batteries going here. Batterie. Okay, we're back. Where are we holding? If you Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Sirle. I said that. I'll say it again. Boom, 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 boom. Mishnah. Okay, we can do this. We can do this. The blood does not affect acceptance of the hide by itself. Okay. Rabbi Svir, Rabbi. I said this right. I'll say it again. Rabbi Chanina, Rabbi Svirle, Rabbi Ema, Afilo Tokma, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, Moja, Rabbi She'ein Efshet Kodem Zrika. The Gemara answers, Rabbi Chanina holds it according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, that the blood does affect acceptance of the hide in such a case, so it would not be burned. And if you wish, say instead that you can even interpret the opinion of Rabbi Chanina in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, as Rabbi Yehuda Nasi concedes. The that flaying is not done before the sprinkling, and so in practice, Rabbi Chanina never saw a hide that was flayed before the offering was disqualified. The Gemara challenges, but isn't there the case of the animal that after the hide was flayed and the blood was sprinkled, was found to have a wound in its intestines, rendering it a treifa, in which case the offering was already disqualified when the blood was sprinkled? Kasavar nimtzeis treifa b'bnei ma'ayim meratzeh ta'ekanami diktani amar Rabbi Akiva idirav lamadnu shehamafshit es habechol ונמצא טרפה שיהיה אותו הכהנים באורו, נשמע מינה. The Gemara answer is Rabbi Chanina holds that in the case of an animal that was found to be a treifa due to a wound in its intestines, the sprinkling of the blood nevertheless affects acceptance because the wound was known at the time of the sprinkling. Oh, it was unknown. The wound was unknown at the time of the sprinkling. The language of the Mishnah is also precise. It teaches Rabbi Akiva said from the statement of Rabbi Chanina, the deputy high priest, we learn that in a case where one flays the firstborn offering and the animal is later discovered to be a treifa, the halacha is that priests may derive benefit from its hide. This indicates that the sprinkling of the blood affects acceptance if the wound was unknown. The Gemara affirms indeed, learned from the Mishnah, that this is so. Ve'elamai kamash melan, Rabbi Akiva kamash melan, afilu b'gvulin. The Gemara challenges, but if this is what Rabbi Chanina meant, then what is Rabbi Akiva teaching us? This statement seems unnecessary. The Gemara answers, this is what Rabbi Akiva is teaching us. The halacha applies not just in the temple, but even in the outlying areas. For example, with regard to the blemished firstborn animal, which is slaughtered outside the temple, if it is discovered to be a treifa before it's slaughtered, it must be buried with its hide. But if it is slaughtered and later discovered to be a treifa, then its slaughter renders the hide permitted to the priests, just as the sprinkling of the blood renders the hide permitted in the temple. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba Amar Yochanan halacha keRabbi Akiva v'af Rabbi Akiva lo amar ela keshihitiro mumche aval lo hitir mumche lo. Rabbi says that Rabbi Yochanan says the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. The Gemara adds, and even Rabbi Akiva said this halacha only in the case where an expert verified the firstborn animal was blemished and permitted it to be slaughtered. But if an expert did not permit it, then its slaughter does not render the hide permitted to the priest. The Gemara concludes, and the halacha is in accordance with the statement of the rabbis, not Rabbi Akiva. Therefore, the flesh is discarded by burial and the hide by burning. And now we start a new Mishnah. Holy manisrofim. Useir imanisrof mizman shenisrof mikmitz boson, nisrof mebeis hadeshen, umitamin begodim, im en nisrofim mikmitz boson, nisrofim bebeis abiro, ve'enon utamin begodim. The Mishnah says, with regard to bowls that are burned, meaning the bowl of Yom Kippur, the bowl of the anointed priest, and the bowl brought for an unwitting communal sin, which are burned after their blood is sprinkled and their sacrificial portions burned on the altar, and goats that are burned, meaning the goat of Yom Kippur and the goat brought for the unwitting communal transgression of the prohibition against idol worship. When they are burned in accordance with their mitzvah, they are burned in the place of the ashes, see Leviticus 4:12, outside Jerusalem, and they render the garments of the priests who tend to their burning impure, see Leviticus 4:25. And if these offerings are not burned in accordance with their mitzvah, because they were disqualified, and offerings that are disqualified are also burned, They are burned in the place of burning in the bira, and do not render the garments of the priests who tend to their burning impure. And the Mishnah continues. What is next? To next side, 104b. Finish the Mishnah. Also motos. Yatsu Rishonis Chutz L'Chaymas Hazar V'Chaim Lo Yatsu V'Hashem Etamim V'Gadim V'Achronim Inim Etamim V'Gadim Ad Shi Yatsu Eilu V'Eilu Etamim V'Gadim Rabbi Shimon Omer Eilu Etamim Ad Shi Yitzad Ha'ol Beruban Nitach Abasar Ein Asoret Etamim V'Gadim. The priest would carry the bowls. We're on top of 104b now. The priest would carry the bulls and the goats that are burned, suspended on poles. When the first priests carrying the front of the pole, emerged outside the wall of the temple courtyard, and the latter priests did not yet emerge, the first priests render their garments impure, and the latter priests do not render their garments impure until they emerge. When both these and those priests emerged, they render their garments impure. Rabbi Shimon says they do not render their garments impure, as this halach applies only to those who burn the offerings. And even then, their garments do not become ritually impure until the fire is ignited in the majority of the offerings. Once the flesh is completely scorched, with no moisture remaining, one who then burns the remains does not render his garments impure. That's the Mishnah, and I believe we'll start the Talmud in the next Daf. As the next Amud,